Okay, so I thought I would do something a little bit different today. So I've been talking about recording how I knit my socks. So as I'd mentioned before, I watched many different podcasts, tutorials. I looked at different books, I looked at different patterns, and I tried to get something that I could understand the construction, but also what size I needed to knit, what needles I needed, what worked for me, what didn't. And I think it's really confusing because there are so many options. Do you use DPNs? Do you use 9-inch circulars? Do you do magic loop? And I think for me, the best advice that I could give is that you need to try everything. DPNs didn't work for me. So DPNs left me with ladders up between every single point where you were switching from needle to needle. So I tried 3 needles, I tried 4 needles, I tried multiple different variations. I tried pulling my yarn tight as I was changing to the next needle. I tried pulling my yarn only when I was knitting the second stitch on the next cable. Or on the next needle, and so on and so forth. So I tried lots, but DPNs didn't really work for me. And then I tried magic loop because it was the needles that I had available to me. And again, I didn't end up with a ladder at the beginning of round, but I ended up with a ladder in the midway point. So eventually I went to 9-inch circulars. My hands were sore to begin with, but after the first sock, and I only did a little bit and I put it down, did a little bit and went to other projects. So I don't knit monogamously on one project. I found that that really worked for me, and it's what I've stuck with. So I'm using 9-inch circulars today. I'm going to take you through how I knit plain vanilla socks. I don't think I'm breaking any sort of pattern, copyright or anything else by going through this. And hopefully you will find it useful in and among all the other bits and pieces of projects, and or not projects, but tutorials that are out there. And if it is something that you really want to try, give it another go, because definitely this is the one thing within knitting that took me ages to get right. However, and I will say this right now at the start, and I'll probably say it at the end again, it was the best perseverance, because hand knitted socks in 100%, well not 100% wool, but 75-25 in terms of composition of wool and nylon are the best socks. They keep your feet so warm. I know that people say in terms of washing them, I do throw mine in the washing machine every now and again. Definitely hand washing is better. So now that I've built up more of a bundle between the family, I typically do hand wash them, but when I had 1 or 2 pairs, they went in the machine, and I'm still wearing them. So this is now 3-4 years on. Those socks are still okay and still completely wearable. I do typically wear them more about the house, or if I have my walking shoes on. So I don't like them in my normal day-to-day shoes. I find it far too tight and I don't like it, but that's again completely personal preference. But I love them in my walking shoes, and I love when I'm out and about for a long walk and have those on because my feet are toasty. So what I'm going to do to begin with is coffee. I'm going to make coffee, and then we're going to sit down and start the first sock. So coffee, I absolutely love my coffee made in this, so I'm going to bring you along with me. My coffee of choice today is a Christmas present, so this is a treat. It's the Fortnum and Mason, and this one is the Queen's Blend. So this particular one says that it is blueberry, light jasmine, orange zest, and it has a silky flavour. Roast level 2 out of 5. Now these are only small wee tins. I have a couple of them. They were a pack for Christmas, but I really love the other 2. Haven't tried this one yet, so let's give it a go. Okay, so I'm going to take you through everything that I use. It looks a lot, but I suppose I've built it up over time. I didn't buy it all at one point, and it's what I've found works for me. So these are what I would use if I was doing magic loops. So these are the Knit Pro Zings. They colour code, so this one is like an orangey yellow colour. I use a 2.25. I am a little bit more of a looser knitter. So if you were using magic loop, this is all you'd kind of need. You might find the DPNs useful the way that I do my heel, but again, you could get away with just using these. So the magic loop I do use for the toe. Casting on, I use my 9-inch circulars. Now again, I treated myself to the Chow Goo. These are the interchangeables, and again 2.25. If I am doing colour work, I have gone up in size on socks only. So if I'm knitting a jumper, I don't typically go up in size for colour work, or a sweater, sorry. But if I'm knitting socks, I do, because I definitely noticed a difference in socks. So again, that might work. These are just vanilla that I'm showing you today. So I only have a 2.25, but if you are doing any sort of colour work, then you might need another size. The Chow Goo I absolutely love for socks. So cast on and the leg of the sock and the foot of the sock. I then got a pack of DPNs. Again, these are the Knit Pro Zings in 2.25, and I use these for the heel. So I like a heel flap and gusset. I have tried all other different types of heels. I don't mind an afterthought heel, and they do work particularly well in colour work, but I'm going to show you the heel flap and gusset today, and I use my DPNs for doing the heel. I also like 2 stitch markers, one for my start of round and one for marking halfway, especially when you're doing the decreases on the gusset. Pair of scissors, again I like my nice small ones, but any scissors will do. Tape measure, and my light bulb markers. Again, I love the light bulb markers for noting how many rows I have done either on the leg or on the foot, so that I do the second sock the same. Now with these ones I'm going to do shorties, because that's what I wear most often, but so there'll be no leg, there'll be no light bulb markers on the leg. So then this is the main yarn that I'm going to use. This is a sock yarn, 75 wool, 25 nylon. I want to say that it's Sardar sock. What I have then done, so there's lots of little speckles in this, so I have tried to pair it up. So the orange I'm going to use, and I'm just using up bits and pieces and minis for this one. I'm going to use the pink, and I'm going to use a blue. So again, showing you how to join in those yarns, or how I do it anyway. So that's the yarns. My coffee is now ready, so we will turn that off. Oh, I love a fresh cup of coffee, and I have my Disney mug, and that will get us going to start the cast on. Okay, so what I'm going to do is to measure the little bits that I have left, just to see. So the pink is about 7.65 grams. The orange is about 7.57, and the blue is about 7.1. So of roughly about the same amount of each of the 3 colours. I said this was Serdar, it's actually Rico, completely different yarn, and it's the Rico Sock Alpaca 4-ply. It is 55% wool, 25% polyamide, and 25% alpaca. So I have knit this into a pair of socks before. I did a pair of shorties, and let's just check actually. So I still have 70.9 left in this after a pair of shorties, and those were a UK size 6.5. So still loads of yarn left. I should get another 2 pairs out of these, I'm hoping. So because of the same amount in each of the yarns, I'm going to use one of the colours for the cuff, I'm going to use one of the colours for the heels, and one for the toes. And I think I will start with the blue. It's the one that I have least of, but I'll need least for the cuff. So I'll start with the blue for the cuff. Again, most of the standard patterns that you look up, 56 it would be the smallest sock, 4-ply sock, 64 stitches for the middle, and 72 for the largest adult size. I typically use a 56 stitch sock for my daughter, although I'm starting to realise, did I say 56? 56 stitch sock? I'm starting to realise that I almost need it to be a 60 stitch sock, so that's okay if you are knitting a vanilla sock. The number of stitches don't matter, although an even number is definitely easier to work out 2 halves of the sock, even though they're not in a half. And for myself, I have a wide foot, but a 64 stitch sock is still big enough. And again, sometimes I'll do 66, especially if there's colour work. I'll maybe try to add a couple of stitches into the colour work if it's possible. If not, then I'll stick with whatever the colour work pattern is. But typically you're going on a 8 stitch repeat. So anything with an 8 stitch repeat, any sock pattern should work for this. So that's why 56, 64, 72, and there you can also go up to an 80 stitch sock. And I suppose part of that is understanding your own gauge. And so as I say, I am a little bit looser, which is maybe why a 64 stitch works for me. But I don't want to go down to a 2mm needle. I am more than happy staying with my 2.25, and I don't want to go down. So these socks are going to be for me, so they're going to be a 64 stitch sock, except that I have played about with lots of different ribs. So I've done 1x1, I've done twisted rib, which I don't mind doing at all. I've done 2x2 rib, and what I have come to realise is that I really like a 2x1 rib. So knit 2, purl 1, knit 2, purl 1. But that means I need a 3 stitch repeat for my cuff. So again, just because my ankle is slightly wider, I cast on 66 stitches. If the 64 is okay for you, and you have a little bit of give, then you might want to go down just to the 63. But again, you're not playing with too many stitches, and then as soon as I'm finished the rib, I go back down to the 64. So I will show you that as well. When I'm casting on, again, I've tried so many different cast on methods, and I think I know the one that I finally finished with, but I think it's called the German twisted cast on. So again, I will show you how I do that. Andrea Mowry has a really good video on this, so again, I'll link it below so that it is there. It's maybe taken at a slightly better angle. But what I have found is that gives me just enough stretch to get it over, and that it's not too tight around my ankle either. I have tested it, one sock with twisted cast on, one sock with standard. They're not massively different, but it just gives you enough. I've tried other cast-ons that give you more stretchiness, but they were just too loose and the socks were just too wide around the ankle. So again, it's the one that works for me. You might need to have a play with a couple of cast-ons, but if playing with a cast-on is something that you haven't thought about, then hopefully this gives you a bit of an opportunity to do that. So I'm going to put the camera down a little bit. I'm going to start with the blue yarn as my ribbing. I use the 2x1 rib, 2 knit, 1 purl. I'm going to cast on 66 stitches. Again, I'm going to put all of what I do in the instructions below, and I will also create a document so that you can download the document and you don't have to then watch the video repeatedly. I'm going to use the German twisted cast on with a 2.25mm needle, and I will need one of the stitch markers out to join in the round. So we'll get that out now, and I think that's about it. So let's get started. What I typically try to do is to measure at the length of my arm, well, kind of to my shoulder, and I kind of know that that gives me enough for a 64, 66 stitch sock. I do create a slip knot for my first stitch. Knots can be controversial, but what I have found is that if I just twist it, sometimes when I'm wearing the sock, I notice that it gets very loose around that point. So I create a slip knot for the first one. Over my thumb and my forefinger, and I go under, through the loop, catch the yarn on my finger, and then go again, through the loop. So I know that for some, they go through the middle and gather, but that doesn't typically give enough stretch. So I go underneath, through the middle, and then catch. It just gives that extra bit of a twist and gives that extra bit of yarn to enable those stitches to stretch just that little bit. So underneath both, through the hole, catch the yarn, and that's us. So I'll do that a little bit closer. So I cross the yarn on my thumb, underneath both, through the middle, catch the yarn on my finger, and for me the tail is on my thumb and coming from the ball is on my finger, okay? I'm not sure if that's the way that Andrea Maury says that she does it, but it's the way that I do it. So cross, under both, back through, catch on my thumb or my finger, and pull. And what I'm aiming to do is, when I look at it, is to try and keep these stitches even. Sometimes what I notice is that I've maybe more of a gap between a few of the stitches, and I'll go back. So I want to try and make sure when I'm doing this that it looks, I'm not pulling it too tight, but I want to pull it evenly. So I'll go on ahead and continue with the rest of the cast on until I have 66 stitches. Okay, so I have 66 stitches, as you will see, and this is typically what I find as well. It's not reaching the end of a 9-inch circular, and that's okay for me. I'm happy enough with that. I don't have too much left, but enough to sew in and make sure that I'm not too short. So as I say, I hold my arm out straight and go to my opposite shoulder. So what I typically do now is to knit a row straight so that it stretches. I could, and I have done it before, I could really pull this out and try to get it to reach, but I find that the first row is almost unbearable in terms of trying to knit. So what I'm going to do is to just knit the first row straight, and I will come back when I've done that. So knit 2, purl 1. Until the end. Okay, so first row done, and what you can now see is that that stretches much easier and makes your second row easy to join in the round. So I add my stitch marker on and I begin knitting. Now, whenever I'm doing this, whenever I'm sewing it in, I do put like an extra sewn stitch at the join because I've knit the first row straight, but I have never ever had a problem doing it this way, and it does mean that it's just easier to knit the first row on a 9-inch circular. So I now can continue in 2 by 1. For a shorty sock, I typically do between 6 and 8 rows of rib. If I am doing, so the longest sock that I would do the leg, I like a sock that is about 4 inches, so I wouldn't do it any longer than about 4-inch length, 10 centimeters. And again, why I tend to like Summerlee knit designs, because a lot of her, particularly the Colourwork Cuff Club, is that kind of length, a little bit shorter sometimes, a tiny bit longer, but in and around that 4 inches, 10 centimeters. So as I say, this, for those socks, I will do typically about 14 rows of rib, but I'm going to do about 8 rows here, and then I will come back again and we can have another look at what I do next. So if you wanted to continue knitting and do a longer leg, that is perfectly okay. So at this stage you can do your rib until the length suits you. It's not going to affect the sock in any way. You can pick your rib, as I said, so you could do a 2 by 2 rib, you could do a 2 by 1 rib, you can do whatever sort of cuff that you would like, twisted rib, whatever. So have a bit of a look at what you prefer on some of the socks. Take a look through Ravelry, take a look at Summerlee Knits, take a look at this Handmade Life, and there's lots more sock designers. I'm actually watching Knit Sip Happy in the background here, and Nancy has lots of lovely sock patterns as well, so you could take a look at some of hers, but it just gives you an idea of different rib patterns that you can do on the sock cuff. I have done a picot wedge as well. One of Twinset and Pearls has the picot wedge in it. It's really lovely for the summer. It's really nice coming out of the top of trainers, and especially if you want to use that special skein of yarn that is a real lovely pop of colour at the top of your trainers. You could have a look at that one as well. But there are lots of different ideas out there in terms of the cuff and how long you want it, and as I say, it does not affect the sock at all. I have got that I kind of know what I like and I stick with it. Sometimes I shift it up just to try something a bit different, but as I say, for this one I will do 8 rows of ribbing, 2 by 1 ribbing, and then I will change to the main colour. This is going to be a shorty sock, So I will come back and see you at that stage. Okay, so I have 8 rows of my 2x1 rib complete, and what I then like to do, I've lost my stitch marker, what I then like to do is to knit 1 row straight, especially, well, not even especially actually, I was going to say especially if I'm changing the colour of yarn, but actually I knit 1 row straight after I purl. So I will do that now, and while I am knitting that row straight, I will knit the first 3 stitches and then I will knit the next knit 2 together, and then I'll knit right round to the end, to the last 3 stitches, and I will knit 2 together and knit 1. So complete knit row, but I'm also taking my 64 stitches down to 66. Now I probably could do knit 2 together and a slip slip knit and all the rest of it, but because it's only on 1 row, I just knit 2 together. So I do that because I do the plain knit row, because if you are changing colour, then you'll get those kind of purl colour bump changes, and knitting the row straight just makes it, I think, go more seamlessly into the next colour. But as I say, if I am doing colour work or any sort of socks, I will knit a plain row before I start into any of the rest of the pattern. Or if it calls for a specific number or a specific length of rib, my last row will be a plain row, a plain knit row rather than the rib. So that's typically how I do it, but as I said, this is something that has just worked for me, and you might find something different that works for you. So once I get round, I am going to tip the camera down so that you can see me joining in the next colour. Okay, so we will finish off this knit row. Okay, and that's me at the last 3 stitches. So I know I'm going backwards here, but I knit those 2 together, knit 1, and that's me at my 64 stitch count. So I snip this off, leaving myself again enough length. I'm not too stingy. I want to be able to sew that in, and then I am starting on this. So I do like a few rows of the main colour, and I don't do anything. I put the needle in as if I am going to knit. Again, I give myself enough of a tail and I just slip it over the needle. I don't do any knots. I don't tie it to the previous colour. I sew it in afterwards. So again, I will just continue to knit round those 64 stitches. At this stage, I typically do 4 or 5 rows. I don't like them too long. You'll probably be able to see the socks that I have on me. Now these are, I'll put the pattern up of these ones, but it goes straight into the heel flap and gusset, but I'm going to add in a couple of extra rows on this particular one just so that it comes up a tiny little bit on my ankle. So I will now knit 4 rows in this main colour, and then I will do the heel flap. So we will just work our way around for 4 rows, and then I will come back and show you the next bit. What I should also do actually while I'm thinking about it is to weigh the yarn there so that I have a bit of an idea as to how much I used for the cuff. So it's 4.9, that was 7.1, so 2.2 grams for 8 rows plus a straight row, 8 rows plus a straight row for the cuff. So there's plenty there to do the cuff of the second sock. Okay, so that's my 4 rows knit. Not the easiest to show, but you've got the 4 rows there. So what I'm going to do now is to do the orange for the heel. But first of all, I am going to knit my way across to halfway. So I have 64 stitches, I'm going to knit to 32. Okay, so this is me about to start my heel flap and where I bring in my DPN. So as I say, this is the Knit Pro Zing 2.25, same as the needle that so 2.25, and I'm going to let my main yarn hang. I'm not going to cut it off. Again, the same way that I joined in the previous one, I'm going to put my needle in. I'm going to get the orange yarn, leave enough of a tail. So you do have, when you're using different yarns, obviously you're going to have more to sew in at the end. I just hook it over and I knit the first 2 stitches. And then I slip one with yarn and back, knit one, slip one with yarn and back, knit one, the whole way across to the end. So you should finish with a knit one. Okay, so at this stage I take off my stitch marker and I let the circular needle hang. If you wanted, you could put stitch stoppers on the end. I haven't lost it yet, although famous last words, this is when I could lose it. I try to get all my ends down through the bottom of the sock, and I have the start of the heel on, and of course I've used orange yarn so it's more difficult to see, slip one, knit one for the heel flap. So my next row, so this is to say where I'm we're knitting straight at this stage. We're just working on these 32 stitches, and we will come back and join it all together after we've done the heel flap. But I am This next row is slip one purlwise with yarn in front, and then purl the rest of the row. So I'll do that, and then we will go through. As I've said, I have the instructions for this down below, and I will also link a PDF that you can download from my Ravelry store. If you don't use Ravelry, let me know and I will email it to you. It's free on Ravelry, there's no cost. It's just a plain vanilla shorty sock, but I will also add into there how you would make it full length. Now, again, if you measure your favourite sock, so the sock that you like wearing and the length of it, if you measure so that you know from the top of the cuff down to the start of the heel, that will give you an idea of the length of the leg that you like. Obviously knitted socks are going to be that little bit different, but that will give you an idea as to the length of the leg that you like. And then you just knit until your cuff, if you were doing a longer one, I think a longer cuff is nicer, and then you would just continue your knit stitch until the full leg is that length, and then start into your heel flap. So that row, as I say, was slip one purlwise with yarn in front, and then this row is slip one with yarn and back, slip one purlwise with yarn and back, knit one, slip one purlwise with yarn and back, knit one, slip one with yarn and back, knit one, slip one, and so on and so forth until the end. So this gives you a slightly more structured heel. If you are wearing it in the sock in your shoes, then it gives it a wee bit more structure and longevity. So it just helps to protect around where your shoe would be rubbing most on the sock. I also find that this particular heel flap construction is the most comfy for me, but again, depending on your shoe shape or your foot shape, your instep, all of that sort of stuff, you may need to play about with a few different designs to get the right fit for you, and there are plenty out there. As I said at the start, this is just what works for me. I don't have a high instep and I have a slightly wider foot, so this is what works for me. So I will continue going. What I typically do, so 32 stitches are what my heel flap is. So I typically knit 32 rows. So my first row I count as my setup row, that knit 2, slip 1, knit 1 to the end. That's my setup row, and then I do 32 rows. So, and I'll show you how I count that whenever I get a little bit further up here. I do measure it, so I do like my heel flap to be about 2.25 to 2.5 inches in length, because again, I know that fit is nice. So sometimes I need to do a couple of extra rows, but again, just I've got used to my gauge, and typically 16 rows is enough. But check, and it's something that you may have to work on just to make sure that you're getting the right length of heel flap, and that's something that can just make it fit better and make it more comfortable. Also make it a little bit easier to get on and off rather than struggling. So I will continue for the 32 rows. I'm hoping when I get to the end of this, what you'll be able to see is that on the back of the work, you can see the slips. So it makes it a little bit easier to count how many slipped slipped rows you have. So I like to have 16 slipped rows. If I was doing a 56 stitch sock, I would want 28 rows or 14 slipped rows. And if I was doing 72, I will do 36 rows in total, so 18 slipped rows. But hopefully you can see on the back there, it's easy to count those slipped rows. I'll try to point it out, but you can see you have 1, 2, 3, and then I just count up so that I have 16, and then I measure the orange bit in this case to see that I have about 2.25 to 2.5, but I'll come back at that stage and do it. So what I'm completing here is on the right side row, a slip one purlwise with yarn and back, knit one the whole way across. And then on the wrong side, I'm knitting straight for the heel flap. I slip one purlwise with the yarn in front, and then I purl the rest of the row. So I will complete those 2 rows, finishing on the right side. So I will finish on a row that is slip one with yarn in back, knit one, slip one, knit one, slip one, knit one the whole way across. I will finish with that row when I know I have 16 rows, 32 rows total, 16 of those 2 row repeat. So I will come back at that stage and show you what I've done, how I count them, how I measure, and then we'll have a look at the next step. Okay, so I have now finished the heel flap. So you do get this nice effect on the slip stitches. So I have completed 16. So again, you should be able to see that it is sort of easier to count each of the slip stitches. So I have 16, 32 rows in total, and I have finished on a slip one, knit one. So on the front, I've finished on the front rather than on the wrong side. And I'm going to measure it. So I will tip you down and measure the length of the heel flap. Okay, so hopefully this is close enough. I have okay, so it is about 2, but I typically stretch it just a tiny bit, because when this is on your foot, it is going to be stretched just a little bit, plus when this is blocked. So initially when I was measuring, I measured this and thought, oh, well, that's only a 2, so I'll knit more. And I knit more, and then the socks were far too big on my feet. So that's what I'm saying. I've learned to just pull it a little bit, and if I can get it to 2 1/4 without really pulling, but if I can get it, then I know that with the stretch when it's pulled on my foot, that will be enough. Okay, so as I've said, that's what I just pulling it ever so slightly. I'm not like really stretching it, but just giving it that little bit of an extra stretch, because if you think of a sock on your foot, and while I don't like my socks tight, I do like them fitting my foot and not falling off. So just pulling it ever so slightly, that is at 2.25, and I know for me that that is long enough. So then what we need to do is the heel turn. So again, I'll take you through that. It's probably easier to follow in the notes below, but I am going to talk you through what I do in the heel turn. So what we're going to do is basically to create a wedge. If you look at the bottom of the socks, I don't have one here that I've done it on, but you want that bit of a triangle, which is what we're going to do now, and then we'll join the whole thing together to do the gusset, which gives your foot enough room to go in and give that space around your ankle. So I'm going to continue this in the same orange colour. You could choose to change and do the heel turn in a different colour, but I'm going to keep it the same. Okay, so for this particular bit, and I do hope that this light is still okay, so I'm starting on the wrong side of the work. I am keeping with my orange and I am still using my double pointed needles for this bit. So this is again for the 64 stitch sock. I'll put the extra bits and pieces in below. I slip the first one and I purl 16 stitches. Then I purl 2 together and I purl 1. I then count the stitches that I have left, so I should have 12. And that just lets me know that I've counted it correctly, and then I turn the work. So this is what's going to allow us to create that triangle for the heel turn. So I turn the work, I slip the first stitch, which is in the middle of the row, with yarn at back, so slip purlways with yarn and back, and I knit 3. And then I do a slip, slip, knit through the back stitch, and I knit 1. And then I count the stitches that are left at that side, and I should have 12. So that's me set up and ready to go. I turn the work again, I slip purlwise with yarn in front, I purl to 1 stitch before the gap. So I've lost a stitch, hold on. You'll be able to see, hopefully, that there is a bit of a, hold on if I can get, so just here you can see that it's more noticeable off camera, but hopefully you'll be able to see where that gap is. So where you turned the last time, then with the stitch before the turn and the stitch after, you purl those together, and then you purl 1 and then you turn. So that should leave you with 10 stitches on that side. You slip 1 purlwise with yarn and back, and you knit to 1 stitch before the gap or before the turn. Again, you should be able to see that there is more of a difference, and I'm not pulling those between those first 2 stitches and the rest. So you, on the right hand side of the work, you slip, slip, knit 2 together, knit 1 and turn your work. Slip purlwise with yarn in front, knit to the stitch before the gap, or purl, sorry, why do I keep saying knitting? Purl to the stitch before the gap, purl 2 together, purl 1, turn your work. And you continue with those 2 rows until all your stitches are worked. So slip 1, purlwise with yarn and back, knit to 1 before the gap, slip, slip, knit through the back, knit 1, turn. Slip 1 purlwise with yarn in front, purl to 1 before the gap, purl 2 together, purl 1 and turn. So I'll just complete this, I'll put it on fast forward, and I will meet you back when I have all the stitches worked. And again, I will end up finishing on a right side row. Okay, so that's me finished. And as you can see, we have this triangle, which is turning the sock. So it's really hard to do with a sock this size, but it's turning onto the base, the sole of the sock. Okay, so we've got this triangle, and we now have 18 stitches. So again, just for confirmation, the 64 stitch sock, and once I do the heel turn, I have 18 stitches left here. So what we now need to do, I'm not going to use this orange yarn anymore, so I'm going to snip it. I'm also just going to check what is left on the orange so that we know. So there was 7.9 grams. So the heel flap in turn took us, I have 4.3 left. So about 3.4. So there'll be plenty in that to do. So about 7.5, 8 grams is enough to do your heel and turn. Now again, 64 stitch sock, so if it's a 56 stitch, you'll definitely have enough. If it's 72 or 80 stitch sock, you will need maybe 9 or 10 grams just to get you through. So again, a nice wee test for me just to know what I'm using in the heels and cuffs and the sock itself. And as I say, this is me ready. So I'm going to continue with my main yarn. It is at, so if I'm holding it this way, it is, the main yarn is attached down here. And this may be slightly different to the way other people do it, but I don't see the point in cutting this to start, because this is where I just finished. So if I was knitting this all in one colour, I would now start picking up this side, knit across the front stitches and knit up or pick up here. But actually what I'm going to do, if I turn this back around this way, is to pick up here, knit across my flap, pick up down here, and then that's me at the new start of row, and I'm going to then start my decreases for my gusset. I will explain it all in the notes, but that's, if I'm using multiple colours, which I tend to do to use up my minis, that's the way that I do it so that I don't have another end to tie in. I don't know if it's right or wrong, the socks still fit me. There is no sock knitting police, so I go with it. So again, what do we pick up along here? So if I can get this close enough, it's maybe easier from this side. We can see, can we? Those stitches. So we can see the stitches that we're picking up along that edge. Because we slipped the first stitch on each side, we should have, and I completed 32 rows, we should have 16 stitches to pick up. If you added a few extra rows because you needed that for the length that you wanted the heel flap to be, you will need to pick up that number of stitches, okay? So if you have followed what I'm doing, your heel flap is about 2.5 inches. You have done 32 rows in total, so 16 slipped rows. You should have 16 stitches to pick up on either side of the heel flap. If it's a 56 stitch sock, you will have completed 28 rows, so 14 slipped rows, so you will pick up 14 stitches. If you've done a 72 stitch sock, you should have completed 36 rows, so you will be picking up 18 stitches. That's the way that I work it out. There's many patterns that do it differently, but that seems to work for me in terms of my row gauge, and that I'm getting the right depth of flap for my heel. You may need to play with it, you may need a few extra rows, But then depending on how many slipped rows you have, is the easiest way that I look at it, is what I'm picking up. Then what I do is to add one more stitch. I pick up one more stitch in this gap, and that basically means that at that heel join there is no holes. Okay, so I'll pick up and then I'll do one extra, so I'll have 17 stitches, 18 across the heel flap and 17 back down, so is that 52 stitches in total? And then I need to start my gusset decreases so that I get those 52 stitches back down to 32 stitches, so that I'm back at my 64 in total, because I still have these which I'm about to join back in. I still have these 32 stitches that I'm about to join in. So the 32 stitches on the front of your foot don't change. You've always 32 stitches. We've now gone to 52 so that we can manage the heel and make sure that the sock is big enough to get our foot into. So we're going to bring those stitches back down with decreasing so that then we're knitting on the sole of the foot. Hopefully that makes sense. What do? I want 2 stitch markers at this stage because I want one at each side just to keep me right. You don't necessarily need it because you can kind of gauge it, but just where the decreases are going to be, I find it much easier to have my stitch markers so that I don't just start to knit mindlessly and forget to do the decreases. So let's get the stitch markers back out. So I'm going to start using my circular needles again. I am putting the stitch marker on. My yarn is still attached, I didn't clip it. And what I'm going to do, I wonder can I show this? I am going to pick up one of these blue, now I'll mess about till I get one. This one here will probably still leave a hole. So I will probably catch the side of this stitch. Okay, I think that's visible. I take the needle from the back, but I knit through the front. So I'm basically twisting the stitch as if you were going to make one. So this would be a make one right. Again, I'll explain this in my notes. And then I go along and I pick up both legs. So I go through both legs. Again, I've seen some people going from the back and knitting twisted again, just to make sure there's absolutely no holes there. Sometimes I do it that way as well, but ultimately you want to make sure that you are picking up both of those loops of the stitch along the gusset edge and that you are knitting into them. I don't do anything fancy. I don't knit through the back loop. Sometimes if I see a bit of a hole, I will knit the next round through the back loop in those particular ones. But yeah, I'm going to put the camera down here so that you can see hopefully what I'm doing. So I've started picking up the stitches along the side of the sock. I am going into the stitches are along the side of the gusset, the heel flap, to create the gusset. That's me right up to the corner of the heel flap. I will now knit across those 18 stitches. Again, not doing anything fancy, just straight knitting across those 18 stitches. And then I'm going to pick up the 16 stitches along the side of the heel flap and the extra stitch so that I don't get a hole at the corner, and I will place my marker. So that's me now across I have come up the side of the flap, I have knit across the heel flap, and I'm now going to, or the heel turn, I'm now going to pick up the stitches down this side. Now again, I am picking up, I always find this first stitch a little bit awkward because I want to catch the one at the top. So, and going under both legs. So that's me 16 stitches down to the end of the orange, and then again I'm going to pick one up and knit, pick it up through the back and knit through the front as if I was making one. Now I don't think it really matters whether you're kind of make one right, make one left, because again it's just in that corner to make sure that there's nothing or that you have as few holes as possible, and one stitch is typically enough for me that I don't get any holes at that particular corner. So that's me ready to go. This is my start of round. So my start of round is knitting across the front of the foot. So I knit those 32 stitches, and then I start working on the decreases. Okay, so that's me across the 32 stitches. I will slip the marker, knit one, slip, slip, knit through the back loop, the two together, and then I'm going to continue knitting round this until 3 stitches before my next marker. So that's me 3 stitches before the next marker. So at this side we knit 2 together and we knit 1. We slip the marker, and the next complete round, so we knit the front stitches along the front of the foot to the first marker, and then we knit round the heel flap and turn. We don't do any decreases, and then we repeat those 2 rows. So I'm going to knit this row, and then I'm going to go back, knit across. We don't do any decreases on the sole or the front of the foot. On the gusset we will knit 1, slip, slip, knit, knit the 3 stitches before the beginning of round, knit 2 together, knit 1, and then the next round will be a complete knit row. So again, those instructions are down below or in the PDF and you can follow along, but they're the 2 rows that will get you those gusset decreases. I will continue to record a little bit of this as I knit it, and then you can start to see the gusset coming into shape. And then I will come back when I have already the 36 stitches here on the front of the foot, and what I want to get to is that I have also 36 stitches from this first marker around the heel flap and turn to the beginning of round. So at the minute I will have 50 stitches because I've just done 1 decrease row. So I'm just knitting round this completely normally, no decreases, nothing else fancy, and then on my next round I will do a decrease round. So I will be back shortly. Okay, so I have now got the gusset decreases done. So you can see along here that we're decreasing back down, and then it's the same on this side. We have a line going down that way. Now they are the, let me see if it focuses, they are the knit 2 togethers just along here, and then these are the slip slip knits. Decrease is done. I'm back to 64 stitches. I still have both of my markers on, and I have now added a light bulb marker to the very last row. So I knit the last row, did the decreases, and then knit 10 stitches of the next row, and I have put my marker in to note the row before, so the row of the last decreases essentially. And then what I do is to add these every 10 rows so that I know how many rows I have done on the foot. So as I say, I would do that on the leg if I was doing a longer leg, but I know that I only did 4 rows, so I don't measure it for here, but I do then on the foot. And what I have started to notice recently is that my tension seems to change. I think because I'm knitting other bits and pieces in between and going from 9-inch circulars to shawls or sweaters or whatever really. So it does change. The other thing that I will show you at this stage is that by lifting that extra stitch, it's here that you typically get the hole. So if you don't lift that extra stitch, you'll get a hole here and a hole here. Now there will be more of a gap there because I need to sew in the ends, but you can see just by lifting that one extra stitch that it closes that gap and you don't have the hole there. Again, along the edge, I think it's a really nice edge, but I'm picking up both loops of the stitch. I'm not going into just one, so I'm kind of going underneath the entire stitch. And again, on the other side, it's a nice clean edge. And obviously, even though we've changed colour, you get a nice clean edge obviously here as well. So yeah, I'm really loving these colours actually together, the blue, the orange and that Rico yarn. So what I intend to do, this is just plain knitting from here on in, so I will leave the beginning of round marker, I will take out my second marker and then just keep knitting. I am going to be knitting a UK 5. in this, and what I found, and I'll put the link below because I don't think I paid for this, was Kate Atherley's size chart. And the chart gave you children's foot sizes or shoe sizes, women's and men's. And it gives you a number of different columns of information. It tells you the typical length of foot for that size. It gives you it in centimetres and inches. Okay, so you get foot circumference, which for everyone that is typically different. You get the suggested finished sock circumference. So for example, she is essentially saying that you should have negative ease of 0.75 inches. As you get further up in the sizes, she suggests 1 inch of positive ease. So once you get up into a UK 4, so UK 1 to UK 3.5, 0.75, and then the rest of the sizes, now these are women's, she suggests a 1 inch negative ease on the foot circumference. And then the foot length, she gives you the foot lengths in inches and centimetres for each of the children's, the women's and the men's. And then a suggested finished sock foot length. So again, for example, in mine, and this is really bizarre, I work in inches for most things until I get to the foot length of socks and I change back to centimetres. So the foot length, so I said I was doing a UK 5, is 9.17 inches, and this is why I moved to centimetres. And the suggested finished sock foot length should be 8.67. So about half an inch. Not quite half an inch, maybe half an inch actually. But in centimetres, 23.5, which is easier for me to measure on a ruler, on a sock ruler. So 23.5 centimetre finished foot length, which is about right because I have measured. But she suggests that the finished foot length for my size should be 22 centimetres, so a full centimetre shorter. And again, that means that the socks fit more neatly rather than as you're walking, there's too much at the front or there's too much falling off the back. So I have found her chart to be really, really useful whenever I'm working out the sizes. And that's typically what I follow. So depending on who I'm knitting socks for and what size their feet are, I will use the suggested finished sock foot length. If anything, I trim it a little bit more, and that's what I'm working on. So if I'm working on a 22 centimetre length in the foot, I will be measuring that from here, from the tip or the end, just where the V starts in the in the heel turn, and I will measure the whole way along. I will pull it so that I have a bit of stretch. I do have a sock ruler, so again I will pull, I won't leave it, I will give it a good tug, because again, when it's on your foot will stretch it, and as you wear it and the heat of your foot, I find the sock does loosen quite a bit. So that's what I'm saying. Even though Kate suggests a foot length of -1 centimetre, I probably, if I'm giving it a good stretch, I'm probably doing a little bit more. So I'll continue knitting round and round and round until I get to 5 centimetres less than the 22 centimetres. So 17 centimetres in my case, because the toe will then be my other 5 centimetres. Typically, and again, I measured the first few toes that I knit, and the way that I'm just knitting a standard toe. I'm not doing a rounded toe, or I don't know the name of the one where each foot is different. I'm not doing anything like that, just a standard toe, standard decreases. I will knit up to 17 centimeters in length from here, so not from my main colour, from here to where I've knit. So at the minute I probably have about 10.5 centimeters, 10.5 to 10.75 centimeters. So by the time you have finished your heel turn, and you've done your gusset decreases, you already have a good bit of the sole of your foot completed. So for me, I will need to do another 7 centimeters. And as I say, I will mark the 10 rows as I go along. From this point, I typically find that I need 20 to 25 rows, which is probably a bit short on row gauge for every pattern that you will read. Because if I need 7 centimeters, no, maybe not actually, because 4 inches would be 10 centimeters. Typically the row gauge on socks, yeah, typically the row gauge is about 28, which is over 10 centimeters. So 20 to 25, depending on my row gauge, is probably about right. So I will check in after 20 rows and we'll see what length it is. I will aim to find my sock ruler so that I can show you how I use it, and then we can have another look at that stage. The only other thing that I'm going to show you is this wee stitch marker or needle stopper that I use. These are, this white one's probably not the easiest. These came in a pack and they're like a coiled spring in plastic, but I am finding them really, really useful to push the 2 needles through of sock. And it's holding them together, that because it's kind of plastic rubber type, it's holding, especially to the metal needles. I don't think I've tried it on wooden needles because I'm typically using them for my sock needles, but I have found those really useful, and I think it was a pack of 4 or pack of 5, and they were $2.99, $1.99, something like that. They weren't overly expensive, and that's in the UK. So yeah, I will check back in. I will continue to do the next 20 rows. They're just plain knitting. There's nothing of any surprise in that, and then we will check the length and I will see you then. At this stage, I'm on a Saturday evening. It is about 8:30 at night, so I probably will continue to knit on this, but I'll not check in until tomorrow or the day after, and we'll see how far I've got. See you soon. Okay, so good morning. The next morning I continued to work a little bit last night on the straight rows of the foot of the sock, and I think I'm there. So this is what we've got. And I have my marker that I put in for the last row of the decreases of the gusset, 25 rows. So 25 rows that has got us to this point. So what I was going to show was how I measure. So I have a sock ruler. Mine's from Hank's Yarn Parlour here in Northern Ireland. Casey has a podcast as well, and the shop is fabulous if you're in Northern Ireland at any stage. So Hank's Yarn Parlour, centimetres on one side, inches on the other, and as I said, I typically use centimetres when I'm measuring the length of the foot. So you also get down here the width in centimetres depending on the UK size, and similarly, or sorry, that's the EU size, and then the UK size with the inches at this. So what I do at this stage, and I think it'll be easier if I tip the camera down. So I do, even if I put needle stoppers on, I typically do lose a stitch at this stage. I have to pick it up, but I try to hold it as best I can. Sometimes it's okay, sometimes I have to pick one stitch up one row, but that's okay, I'm happy enough with that. Okay, so hopefully this allows you to see. I'm in a different position than yesterday, but the light's better here. The light is absolutely rubbish today. So this is how I do it. I turn it upside down and I put the sock on this way round. So I'm trying not to alter or not to move the stitches on the needle. So if I was just to leave that as is, you will see that it's, so I haven't pulled it, I haven't stretched it. It's about 15, and I had said that I needed 17, and then that would be me 5 centimeters before. So I push it in to the heel turn. So that's just where the heel turn is starting. So that's where I'm measuring from. But actually what I do is to pull the sock, because that's the way it's going to be on your foot. And I prefer my sock to fit more tightly so that when I'm walking, it doesn't fall off. And as you will see, that's now at 17. So I do pull it quite a bit. I didn't initially, and I couldn't work out why my socks were so big and why they were falling off my foot. So as I say, that is now at the 17, and I'm ready to start the toe. And I have lost a stitch. So I will pick that up. Okay, so that's us back. And as I say, I have used needle stoppers in the past, but what I find with the needle stoppers is that they pop off and go halfway across the room, and then I'll lose my stitch anyway. So yes, what I'm going to do is to add in the pink and start the toe decreases. So as I said, there are lots of different toe options. I haven't yet tried the rounded toe, which is that's what I'm going to do next. I have done a couple of different toes, but I've found that just the standard basic toe works for me and works for the socks that I'm knitting for family. So I haven't really messed about. I've messed about with the heel lots. I've messed about with my cast on. I've messed about with how I do my gusset pickup, just to give me that extra little space. So I've done all of those things, and how many stitches I'm picking up in my gusset. I've messed about with all of that, but I haven't really played about with the toe because it's worked and it's comfortable. So I didn't see the point. So as I've said, I will change colour to the pink for the toe. Again, I think it makes it easier for you to see exactly where the bits and pieces are coming in. So your cuff, the really tiny bit of the leg, which you can increase to whatever size, the heel flap and gusset, and then the foot of the sock itself, followed by the toe. So using all of these different colours, you can see, but actually I'm loving the colours. I'm really enjoying the colours that I've picked out to match in with this Rico alpaca sock yarn. So the other thing that I do at this stage is to change across into magic loop. I don't really need to do it right now. I could do a few decreases on the 9-inch circulars, but I just don't. I change as soon as I'm starting the toe, and I then do magic loop at that stage. I know I had said that I find that I end up with a bit of a ladder at the, not at the beginning of round, but at the halfway point. But for some reason, when I'm doing the decreases on the sock toe, that it doesn't seem to happen. It's really weird. Can't work it out, have tried. It is what it is. So I take off my marker, my beginning of round marker at this stage, because I know I don't need it in Magic Loop. The Magic Loop, these are 100 centimetre, I think, 2.25s, Knit Pro Zings. I love Knit Pro Zings, even in the interchangeable, they're my favourite go-to knitting needles. So these are the fixed. I like a longer needle. I think that helps whenever you're getting to the smaller stitches, that they're all on the needle. I've tried Magic Loop with my ChowGoo interchangeables and I find it really fiddly. I don't know why. Again, just me. So what I will also do at this stage is to cut my main yarn. So that's me finished with that yarn. Again, I leave enough of a tail to allow me to sew that in. And I have my pink out for the foot. So I put that yarn to the inside so that it doesn't annoy me and I don't have to try and put it through later. Again, as if I'm going to knit, leave enough of a tail, loop it over and begin. So I don't do any decreases. I change colour, even if I'm not changing colour, I'm still changing to my Magic Loop. So I will knit across the 32 stitches again. This is a 64 stitch sock. So I'll knit across and then I'll show you what I do. Okay, so that's the first 32 stitches, so kind of the top of the toe, and then I pull that through till I'm nearly at the next needle and I knit across. Now I have stopped. I don't really pull anything extra tight. I just do normal. So whatever tension I use on the rest, I do hold them close. So I don't let the cord fall. I do hold it close so that the stitches are close together. But I don't do anything else special at that join. Okay, so that's me done with my 9-inch circular. And I have my socks. Push the tail inside. I have my socks on my Magic Loop. So I'm going to try and move the camera actually at this stage. Hopefully this is a little bit of a better view in terms of what I'm doing at this stage. So what I have is 32 stitches, 32 stitches. Again, this is a 2-row repeat. So this first row is knit 1, slip, slip, knit, knit to the last 3, knit 2 together, knit 1, and then the same going back on the other side of the needle. The next row is a complete knit row, and then you repeat those 2 rows. So I'll have that on screen, and I will also have it in my notes. So that you can follow along. But that's the toe that is typically in a lot of sock patterns. Okay, so the way, again, I don't think this is anything that will surprise you. Pull out the back so that I have a little bit left, but most of my cable I have coming out this way. So I knit 1, again I'm holding everything tight but I'm not pulling anything extra on the yarn. I am slipping and I knit through the back loop. Knit across to the last 3 stitches. So that's me at the last 3 stitches. I knit 2 together knit one, and then I turn the work. So this is me now on the sole of the foot. So that's how I think it's easier to keep track of socks, because my first needle is on the top of the foot and my second needle is on the sole of the foot. I'm doing the same thing here. We knit one, we slip knitwise, knit two together through the back loop, knit to the last 3 stitches, and that will be 4 stitches decreased on this round. So every time you do a decrease row, you're decreasing by 2 stitches on each needle, 4 stitches on the round, and then your next row is plain. And you do the decreases, well, I do them until I have 14 stitches for a 64 stitch count sock. Again, I used to go to 12, but 14 was more comfortable, so I now stop at 14. I would do 14 or 12 for a 56 stitch sock, and I stop about 16 for a 72 stitch sock. So knit 2 together, knit 1 at the end, and then I do go in at this stage and I pull those tails a little bit. And I'll sew those in later. So this row, or this round, is a knit. So I don't do any decreases, I just knit the whole way across this needle and the whole way across the next one. So what you'll also see there is that I do not tighten the stitch, but I do make sure that the stitch is flush enough with the needle before I pull the needle out, because the cable is a little bit finer. I prefer to do that when it's on the needle, so that I'm not pulling it too tight, because when I was doing it when it was on the cable, I realised that that's when I was getting an even bigger ladder at that side. So as I say, I just give it a wee tiny tug before I pull the needle out, and that just seems to give me less of a ladder at the halfway point. So I continue those 2 rows. I'm back to beginning of round. This round is knit 1, slip, slip, knit, knit to the last 3, knit 2 together, knit 1. Same on this side, and then a knit round. So I will go until I have 14 stitches left on each needle, 28 in total, and then I will do one more full knit round, and then I'll come back and show you the Kitchener stitch. I may need to be in a different position for the Kitchener stitch, but we'll see when we get there. So I will continue on with those 2 rounds until I have 14 stitches on each cable, and I will be back. Okay, so we are complete. I have 14 stitches on each needle, as you can see. The decreases on both sides are lying nice and flat. So I have 14 stitches left. I have a nice long tail to do the Kitchener, and I'm going to go through the Kitchener now too. And okay, so just out of curiosity, what I'm going to do is to measure the toe. So it's 5 centimeters. So the way that I've done the toe is 5 centimeters. So again, if you change the toe, you may need to check the length depending on the number of rows that you're knitting, so that you know when to stop the foot, so that the sock is the right length. So I had said I use 5 centimeters, but that's because my toe is 5 centimeters. So Kitchener then. The way that I do the Kitchener, again, I don't think it's necessarily any different from anyone else, but I will take you through it and show you how I remember it. So again, I don't use a special sewing needle, it is just a straight one. Okay, so I'm going to move you so that you're closer and looking down over my shoulder again, and then we'll do the Kitchener and finish the sock off. So the way that I remember it, so this is the front, or the top of the sock, and this is the sole of the sock. The yarn is coming from the back needle. And the way that I remember is that on the right side, I knit. On the wrong side, I purl. So that's how I take the stitches off the needle. So therefore, just to start the Kitchener off, I purl because I'm not taking the stitches off, and I knit on the back stitch to get me started. That's me set up and ready. So then I knit on the front needle to take the stitch off, and I purl. Then I purl on the back needle to take the stitch off, and I knit through the next one. I knit through the front and I purl. I purl and take off and knit on the back needle. I knit and take off and purl on the front needle. I purl on the back needle and knit. Now I keep an eye on how tight or how loose. That is okay at the minute. So I'm at the back, so I knit to take off the front and I purl through the next stitch. I purl on the back and take off, and I knit through the next stitch. I knit and take off and purl, purl, take off and knit. I typically keep my finger in between. I just think it makes it easier and I'm not catching the stitches with my needle. So knit the front and take off and purl, purl on the back and take off and knit, knit, take off and purl, purl, take off and knit, knit, take off and purl, purl, take off and knit. And you can see that coming together, so I'm just watching along here to make sure I'm not pulling it too tight, and if I look at it on the flat it does look like I've just had a continuation of stitches there. So again, the thread, the yarn is to the back, so I knit and take off and purl, I purl, take off and knit. So I've one stitch on each needle, I knit and take off and I purl and take off. So I always end up with this, always, but that doesn't bother me. So I put my hand inside the sock, and I think you can see that. I put the needle and catch it from the inside into basically where I have finished. So if I take it out again, so there's the finished, and I'm going in just underneath. There is a bit of a hole, but we'll close that up now. I turn the sock inside out, I pull it through and give it a little tug so that those bits are now on the inside of the sock. I then stitch up through them. I do that twice and then go through the loop so that that's more of a knot. And then what I do is to just go under the loops. So I'm just going under a few of the loops along the toe of the sock. I don't want to leave too much of a knot or anything because I feel that you'll feel it in your toe. And then I come back a couple of stitches to save it unraveling. And the first couple of times that you wear this, it seems to felt in. I've never ever had a problem with it unraveling, and I've now been wearing my socks for quite a while. And then I do the same with the rest. So what you'll see, I think, is that there's a bit of a hole there. So where I joined, there is a little bit of a hole. So when I'm sewing this, I will sew the pink yarn along that way, the blue yarn along this way, and that's enough to close it up. So I don't put a knot. I don't knot those two yarns together. And where you can see the kind of pink purl stitches coming through, I go up through those. Okay, so I go up through those. Again, this is the way I do it. I then can't see it on the other side. I bring it across 6, 7, 8 stitches. I don't feel this on the inside of my foot, or on the inside of the sock on my foot. I'm not pulling it overly tight. So I have that little row, I think you can see it there. And then again, I go back a couple of stitches. I don't knot. I don't knot them, and I don't find that this unravels. And then I clip the end. I'll do the same with this, but I'll go across the other direction, and again I will pick up those purl stitches. You'll see you have the ridge of your pickup. So again, you'll not see this from the outside. So I do go along those stitches. I pick up both legs. And again, I don't feel this on my foot. And then I come back up a couple of stitches. And I snip. So this corner then, the other side of the heel flap, was where you could potentially have a hole. If you've picked up that extra stitch, you shouldn't have, but again, I just give it a little bit of a tug because that's where I joined the yarn in, and I come down that gusset pickup. Again, you're not going to see this from the outside. The stitches are completely on the inside of the sock. So I come down there, picking up both legs, and then I go back up a couple. Before actually, so that's where I have woven in the ends, but you can't see that at all on the right side of the sock. So the last one is the cast on tail. I do this from the inside. So I take it, where do I say, if I go this way, so that's, I'm closing this gap, and remember, sorry, hold on, I'm closing this bit of a gap, you can just see there. Remember that I knit one whole row before I joined, but you can't really see it there, so I go under 2 strands, and then I come kind of back down in between the middle of the stitch, and I join it to the knit, the side of one of the knit stitches inside the sock. So that now gives me an edge that you would hardly even know that that's the cast on bit. And then what I do is loop it down through each of those knits on the inside of the ribbing. And then I go along a couple of the purl bumps, not where I sewed in the, so this would be my knit row of the last of the ribbing colour. Back a couple of stitches and I snip it off. So again, you can hardly see where you've sewn that in, and on the right side you can't see it at all. So if I can now, so this is the sock. I am going to block it for you so that you can see the difference and we can compare. But I'm going to take out the light bulb markers and I'll put it on to a sock blocker at this stage just so that you can see it. Okay, so I don't have a huge amount of battery left, but I'm finished. As I say, what I will do is to show you the finished sock once I've blocked it, because it makes such a difference, and I will show you the blocking process also. But here's the sock. So the pale blue, few rows of the leg, heel, flap and gusset, and the toe. This was UK 5 that I did it for. Plain vanilla sock, but that Rico with the extra little bit of colour just adds such a nice change and variation. The other side of the sock, you really don't see a difference. Sometimes when you're doing colour work you can see the difference, but not on a vanilla sock. So as I've said, what I'm going to do is to block this so that you can see the difference in the sock once it's blocked. If there's anything as I've been recording that isn't quite close enough in terms of stitch, then I will add little bits in as I'm knitting the second sock. Also, I did take the light bulb markers out there, but only because I've recorded and I know how many rows I've done. I always leave the light bulb markers in for the first sock until I get the second sock done, especially if I don't cast it on straight away, because then I know if I come back to it months later what I've done. So I don't normally take the light bulb markers out, but as I say, I know I have it in the recording. So the other thing, just to show you, the corners where you joined in, you're not getting any holes there, and I'll show you the other side as well. You're not getting any holes by picking up that extra one stitch whenever you come down that edge. So as I say, I'll take you through the blocking process. I do it really quickly and really easily, and then we will see what it's like when it's blocked. Okay, so just a quick blocking. Sock with me. I do it in the bathroom sink. I don't add any wool wash for my socks. I probably should, but I don't. I do use a little bit of warm water, not roasting, but just lukewarm. So I fill the sink up enough. I let the sock soak. This is sometimes where you'll see some of the colour leaking out. Now I can't see it happening with any of these colours, but oh, maybe it is going to with the pink. I just push it down so that all of the stitches get immersed in the water and have time to relax. And then I just leave it for 15 to 20 minutes and then come back and wash it out, which I will do in a second. Well, I'll do in 15 minutes. So into the sink, I don't put any wool wash, I just let it soak. And as I say, yeah, I'll come back in 15 minutes. Okay, so 15 minutes have passed. I drain the water. You can see, I think, that the water's a little bit pinky orange, so there has been a bit of dye to come out. And I just squeeze the sock. I don't wring it, I just squeeze it as best I can. I'm also trying to do this one-handed. And then I give it a shake out and I take it to the towel. So I have this towel doubled over. I set the sock on and I literally roll it up and give it a really good squeeze. Now if this was a jumper, I'd get up and stand with 2 feet to get as much water out as I possibly can, but this works for a sock. And if I have 2 socks, I then continue to roll the rest of the towel. And that takes enough water out of the sock. It's not dry, but that works really well. So I'll now go put it on the sock blocker. So these are my sock blockers. As you can see, this is a 41 to 42 and I need the 37 to 38. So if you turn them over and push in the middle, that'll take that one off. And then I may need my other hand for this. But you slide in that and then we will put the sock on, so I'll be back in a second. So the sock is now on the sock blocker and I leave it until it's dry. Okay, so we are now just over a week later and we have 2 socks. So what you will see, I've just finished this one, so what you will see is that this one has been blocked and this one hasn't. So it does make a massive difference to block your socks. This one even looks way smaller than this one. So blocking it definitely just allows it to sit so beautifully. This is what I have left. Whoops. That's what I have left of the little ball. So I think the blue, I have about 2 grams left and I have just over 1 gram of each of those left. I still have 50 grams of the Rico left. So as I said, I had already done a shorty pair in those. Now the toe and the cuff was a different colour. But I've already got 2 shorty pairs of socks out of the Rico yarn. So I should actually get another 2 pairs if I again match in different colours, or I'll get a full pair of socks because I only like them about 10 centimetres in the leg length. So I'll get a full pair of those with a wee bit left over for the toes or something else. So as I said, I've gone through each of the steps from the cuff to the leg, and you can extend that leg. The heel, using a heel flap and gusset. The foot and how I do that, and then just a standard toe. And I hope that you find something useful. As I mentioned at the start, this is how I do them. So not necessarily something that will work for you, but if you really want to try socks and you're finding that DPNs aren't working, Magic Loop hasn't worked, or it didn't work 6-7 months ago, 2 years ago, but you want to give it another go, hopefully this video will give you a bit of inspiration to give it another go. As I said, there are many tutorials out there doing all the different variations. I know Crazy Sock Lady has some fabulous videos and tutorials, but because I like to watch how different people knit their socks, and I picked up different bits from loads of different people, I just thought this would add to the pool and hopefully help one of you. So I've put them both on sock blockers, so they now look like they've both been blocked, which is lovely. This is the one that hasn't, on the pink. And the way that the yarn is pulling in the Rico is a little bit different, and it's a little bit different on both sides, but I just like how fun that yarn is. And when it's on your foot, you're not going to see that anyway, but I love how fun that yarn is. So as I said, I hope that you have found something in all of this. I will, if you've got to this stage, thank you very much, but I will put in bookmarks the whole way along so that you can jump to the parts of the tutorial that you want to. And if there's anything that's not clear enough, if you let me know, I'll record another video and put it up, or amend this one. And yeah, thank you for coming along on this journey, and I hope, as I said, inspires one or two of you to try socks again, because I promise you they are the warmest socks that you will wear on your feet without causing stickiness or without causing sweaty feet. They are just brilliant. So I hope you enjoy knitting your socks. Thank you very much. Bye.